You are the master of your own destiny. As an individual citizen of the internet, you control the narrative of your own story, your level of fame with how hard you work, and what information about yourself to share to put your best foot forward. However, by putting yourself out there, you are automatically subjected to all types of criticism. You may draw negative criticism if you are a suspected communist, are a suspected libertarian, are a female gamer, are any race other than white, sell nutrition teas, are exceedingly rich, are exceedingly poor, if you're gay, if you're trans, if you're 15, if you have an OnlyFans link in your bio, if you're Elon Musk, if you've dated Elon Musk, if you make bad rap music on SoundCloud, if you're a Nazi, if you look like a Nazi, if you fake and finally, have an anime profile picture. Hey guys, welcome back to the CTRL+S podcast. And if this is your first time listening, you are also welcome. This is going to be a bit of a different episode today. It'll be a little bit more serious, but I'll try and make it as fun as I can because I think it's interesting and I think it's worth talking about. A few weeks ago, I saw something that made me kind of angry. Frustrated is probably a better word, but it bothered me enough to want to make a few points about the way that we do activism on the internet. I don't get angry very often, and when I do, it's usually either righteous, like when someone I care about is hurt by something else, or it's really inane, like when the Walgreens by my apartment is out of Ben & Jerry's Half-Baked. So today we're talking about internet activism, power, and who actually has control in society. And that answer is more complicated than any of us like to admit, especially in the age of the internet. And I'll get to what actually made me so frustrated in a bit, but this is CTRL+S, and it wouldn't be CTRL+S without some good old historical context. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of activism, how it's moved over to the internet, and how the internet can help and hurt the causes we care about the most. I'm going to speak from a primarily American perspective, but keep in mind that the internet is used all over the globe for activist purposes. In fact, that's one of the greatest things about it. You can spread news within your own country and send it out across the World Wide Web, so news outlets and other users can pick up on what's happening. And American activism itself has a very rich history. The First Amendment gives us the right to protest, or the right to peacefully assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. And as a journalism student, this is my favorite amendment. If you're watching on YouTube, comment your favorite amendment below. So the right to protest is a really important one. It digs right into the founding ideas of this country. And there have been many revolutions throughout the history of the United States, but the most memorable and influential are the ones we can hear and see through photos, TV, or radio recordings. Maybe as an elementary school kid, your teacher played Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Maybe when you were a bit older, you saw news footage of civil rights protesters being sprayed with fire hoses by police or being attacked by dogs. I was always interested in the books How the Other Half Lives, which documented extreme poverty in 1880s New York, or The Jungle, which exposed unsanitary conditions in meatpacking plants and changed food safety law forever. I was born after 9/11, and I doubt it would have felt as real to me if there wasn't footage of the event. And I've always been fascinated with footage from presidents over the years, even if they're not participating in social movements and just responding to them and interacting with the people. Ronald Reagan comes to mind, and he had that actor background. And I think of things like the AIDS crisis or anti-drug and alcohol campaigns. Mixed reviews on those, by the way, Ronald. Only natural that we've become more involved in these situations since we can see and hear everything that's going on around us. And now most of it's in real time right in our pockets. And that proximity to everything in the world, positive or negative, I think increases our likelihood to want to get involved. But it can just as easily create fear and overwhelm. In previous episodes, I've talked about the early internet and how it was more decentralized before the advent of social media. There were search engines, but if you wanted information on a specific topic, it was likely that someone in your real life would have to give it to you. As a lighter example, if you're a Nintendo fan, maybe the kid down the street who also really likes Pokemon recommended a forum site to you, and you recommended it to your other friends who also like Pokemon. And now that website has spread through word of mouth and then may be more likely to appear further up the list in search results. And now every child in the world is afraid to listen to the Lavender Town music. One of the first social movements that spread online was that of the Zapatistas. The Zapatistas were a far-left militant group based in the Chiapas region of southern Mexico. And this is a relatively complicated piece of history, but what you need to know is they were fighting to keep their communal land after the passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. And for Mexico to be included in NAFTA, they had to restructure the way they classified land, which would have made the publicly owned land where this indigenous group resided privately owned. So when NAFTA went into effect on January 1st of 1994, the Zapatistas attempted a takeover of the Mexican government. And this is a really simplified history, but if you want to know more, I suggest you read the article The Zapatista Effect by Henry Cleaver. But the politics of the Zapatistas are less important to this episode than how their messages spread. This was one of the first social movements to gain support through a network of online web pages and forums. News could be suppressed because Mexico was under single-party rule at the time, so connecting information through these channels helped garner support for Zapatista causes. And one more thing here, the Zapatistas themselves didn't really use the internet to communicate with each other and to the public. Most of them were initially located in rural areas and less likely to have access to the internet. So secondary sources usually spread the information about the Zapatistas. Regardless, it's interesting to see this kind of widespread activism in the mid-90s internet. Moving into the early 2000s, MySpace came in 2003, Facebook in 2004, forming what we think of social media as today. And internet activism during this time was still relegated to pretty small, insular communities until the 2010s. I think one of the driving factors for getting people mobilized and together was Facebook groups, which was released in 2010. And this allowed communities to mobilize and organize together and reach out to others when they had a plan. Also, online journalism was picking up speed, which gave people access to all sorts of new information about topics they'd never heard of. There's not really a space limit on a website like in a newspaper, so more space could be filled with meaningful stories. By 2012, 45% of American adults had a cell phone, and pretty much everyone was using a computer at least, so the idea of getting information through a purely digital source was becoming more commonplace. You know that saying, knowledge is power? If knowledge is power, if you have it, you become empowered, for better or worse. And I think the early and mid-2010s is where that shift happened online. I mean, I personally witnessed it, and I think this period of collective action, political, social, or otherwise, contributes to why Gen Z is inclined towards activism today. And my favorite early example of this in the 2010s is something you may have forgotten about. In 2014, the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge made the rounds to raise money for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis research. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis research. You do the challenge, you donate, and then challenge a couple friends to do it and donate as well. This is like if you made a chain email physical and also really, really cold. I was 11 at the time, and I remember doing this with my 8-year-old brother, and other kids at school did it too. And our moms all donated it and put it on Facebook. Celebrities did it. It was on TV. It was a whole thing. And the result? Raised $115 million for the ALS Foundation and allowed them to increase their annual funding, which caused a 20% uptick in their scientific output, leading to new information and treatments for ALS. And that's the power of the internet right there. And tons of movements kept happening after. For example, the Tea Party movement, made up of right-wing voters and politicians, used the internet to drum up support for protests as early as 2009, starting as a grassroots movement and then gaining some big-name donors, commentators, and candidates. The Tea Party played a huge role in getting Donald Trump elected in 2016. The Me Too movement came around 2017 to help women and men share their stories of sexual assault and exploitation, especially in the workplace or by men in positions of power. This changed the cultural consciousness around sexual assault forever, making it at least marginally safer for survivors to share their stories and be believed. But by far the biggest turning point for internet activism was 2020 in the Black Lives Matter movement. The kickoff goes back to what I was saying earlier. We had a video of George Floyd being murdered by a police officer. We could see and hear it. Someone filmed that with their phone, put it online, and the rest was history. That led to the arrest and conviction of the police officer who killed him and sparked a greater movement to acknowledge police brutality and systemic racism in America. There's much of that year I don't remember, but I know I spent the summer signing petitions, reposting infographics, and learning how to confront the biases I had about race, and probably playing Animal Crossing. I remember being so frustrated that those in opposition to Black Lives Matter couldn't see the obvious injustices in our country, or simply chose to turn a blind eye to uphold their idealistic view of it. That feeling of frustration was honestly radicalizing, and I think it was for a lot of people. And since 2020, I think a lot more people want to take action and voice their opinion online to spread information and make a change. And that sort of accessibility is important too. Everybody was in their houses for the most part, and you could feel like you were making a change from your bedroom. If you were at a protest, you could film it and post it online. This citizen journalism was integral to the movement. I remember watching the Twitter hashtags for my local protest instead of the news coverage. The news said the police threw a tear gas canister because people were throwing things at them. And my friend who was there and many posts who corroborated her story online said one person threw an empty water bottle. The other protesters told them off, but police threw tear gas anyway. That extra angle is important for changing hearts and minds, especially in the beginning. But there's a risk of fake news, and it depends on who you're willing to believe. Also, people aren't just immunocompromised or disabled during a pandemic. There are tons of people who aren't able to attend protests or marches for health reasons, and the internet gives them space to voice about what they're passionate about. Don't forget, the internet can be a safe space for people to find information or community when their real lives don't offer that. And the internet is such an extension of real life now that it feels like making a kinder space online can translate outward. One more important thing in this section, slacktivism is a word that came about for the kind of activism people do just to feel better about themselves, for doing just a little bit to participate in a movement without really contributing to any substantive change. And I think this slacktivist classification can vary based on who you talk to. But I think educating yourself online, sharing information once or twice, and being willing to talk about things in the real world isn't slacktivism. Rather, I'd say it's like posting the black square in your feed or an infographic and calling it good. Because here's the thing, activism takes work. It takes money, it takes time, resources, large numbers of people, the will to be a little annoying, and powerful figures to lead the charge or actually make the change. Take Roe v. Wade as an example. The mass number of people saying, don't overturn the case, was outnumbered by the few people that actually had the power in the situation, regardless of what the populace they served was making clear they wanted. In that situation, the Supreme Court had the power and nothing was going to convince them otherwise. Maybe it was their personal conviction, maybe it was their connections or their reputations on the line. Who knows why they made that decision in the end? Let's think about some other situations and who actually has the power there. With the recent sweep of anti-transgender legislation, Congress has the power to change that. And you have the power to call your representative every day until they get it through their head that you actually don't need to know what's in someone's pants in order to respect them. If your school district is proposing a new curriculum that you don't like, you can show up to a meeting and tell them that you don't want your kids reading a book about gay cartoon penguins because it might make your kid gay. And that would be the end of the world. My point here is power is actually pretty malleable. You can tip the scales with enough people or enough money or enough publicity. And publicity is the internet's currency, right along with attention and, actual currency. And the quickest way to get your message out is to get popular people to talk about it. That can be news sites, celebrities or influencers, or maybe even companies who are willing to get behind your cause. There was a lot of talk in 2020 about using your platform to spread awareness for social causes, which I think was a largely good thing. But there's a lot of nuance here that I think we can examine like adults. A lot of people called celebrities to share social causes to drum up support, which worked in a lot of cases. However, not sharing became a mark of disdain on those who were unwilling to for whatever reason. So even if these celebrities, influencers, or companies are sharing support for a cause, it could just be a method for staying relevant, getting clout, or avoiding cancellation. Also, it was pretty clear that those in opposition would use their platform to, oppose. And I could talk about cancellation forever, and I will. But what I'll say here is that cancellation used to be less about driving people off the internet forever and more about getting people to be accountable for their bad behavior, while also having the side effect of chasing them off the internet forever. So with all that context out of the way, it's finally time to talk about what made me mad. I'm not going to do a deep dive into this because I think the guttural reaction I had is more interesting than whatever hypothetical drama is here. I'm a big fan of Brittany Broski, who's an online comedian with a very funny podcast and a personality that I relate to immensely as a 20-something woman. She frequently talks about social justice, especially feminism and her experience with sexism, and has supported a number of causes in the past, but most of her content is just silliness. As most of you probably know, the conflict with Israel and Palestine has claimed a number of lives. There are war crimes involved, and many are asking world powers to push for a ceasefire. I think war is terrible, hot take, and many like me have taken to social media to condemn the conflict and many actions towards a G word that YouTube and Spotify wouldn't want me to say. This creator named Maya Abdullah, who actively posts about the Free Palestine movement, who I had never heard of before, called out Brittany Broski for not using her platform to spread information about Free Palestine. Brittany posts a video on her close friend's Instagram story where the thesis was, "Why are people asking me to speak on this? In what world am I an authority on this topic?" With a pretty flippant tone where she's trying to acknowledge that she finds herself in a situation that feels kind of absurd to her, but it just generally comes across as a little careless. And Maya responds by saying Brittany shouldn't be going about her business without addressing the situation because there's a G word going on, and she has a platform and access to a large number of people to share resources with. And since I commented on the tone of Brittany's video, I'll say that Maya's video came across as kind of condescending to me, but if I dedicated my time to a cause and saw someone I thought didn't care, I would be frustrated too. So Brittany responded about 8 hours later to Maya's video, saying she had taken too long to comment on the situation and use her platform. She briefly explains the situation in Palestine and provides resources at the end. It's a pretty measured response, and she's by no means canceled at this point. This was a pretty small event, all things considered, but it really stuck with me. The more I think about it, I have no clue who's right here. Some people say they were disappointed in Brittany for not speaking out, and most of Brittany's comments on her response say they were glad she said something at any time. I actually saw Maya's video first, and I was kind of taken aback by it. I thought it was kind of weird that she was called out in the way she was. And I was also confused that she was being called out because this is the creator I watched thirst over Pedro Pascal and make monkey noises into a microphone. Why would she be the one to tell me about Palestine? But the more I think about it, maybe that's the magic in it. Celebrity endorsements work for products, and influencers using their platform for social causes is kind of the same thing if you think about it. There was no reason for her to not say something, and I actually think Brittany would have eventually, but it was just off-putting for me to see her called out. And I'm not saying she absolutely shouldn't have been, but all I thought about was the time and energy that went into all three videos when I initially saw them. My big question was, why are we spending time calling out or canceling creators when we could be calling out the people with actual power? And then I started thinking more about the power at play here. Brittany and Maya both have access to people they can spread a message to. Is there anyone forcing them to do so? No, other than the audience, which holds their social clout. So the structure here is weird. Israel has the bombs, the foreign powers can tell them not to drop them, the US can influence foreign policy, Congress people can influence the US, voters can call and organize to influence Congress people, and the voters receive information through journalists and wherever else they get their information. Sometimes people at any level won't listen. And sometimes you just get your news from influencers like Brittany Broski or Maya Abdullah. Do I think this is a responsible practice? No. But we've got a media literacy problem in this country, and this is probably the best I'm going to get for now. If it sounds like I'm not taking a hard stance here, I'm not, because I don't think that I should. I think there's actually a lot of nuance here, and I just wanted to talk about it and get you thinking rather than, tell you what you should actually believe. And if you take away anything from this episode, I just want you to think about where your time and energy is going. I spend way too much time reading and educating myself and less time actually activating myself for a cause to make a change. I need to get on the streets and call my senators more. It's not that hard, but it's supposed to feel like it is. Things change slow because if they changed fast, there would be no stability. But that doesn't mean we don't have the power to push. And if the way that you do that is with your phone, whether that's the start or the end point, it's better than nothing in my book. Thank you for listening to Control+S. This is the last episode I have contracted for my college's podcasting class, and more may be yet to come. I don't know, I'm a busy gal, but I have other episodes you can watch, and you should subscribe in case I do something interesting again. Whether or not that happens, I'm going to leave you with a challenge. Today, I want you to do one thing that you think will make a difference in the world. Maybe donate to a local women's shelter, or watch a documentary about a social movement you don't know about, or talk to your family about something you care about. Maybe just talk to someone you normally wouldn't. Some of my most eye-opening experiences have been awkward and unfamiliar, but you don't grow your muscles without getting a little sore first. Until next time, I have been and will continue to be Macy. Bye, y'all.